Digitizing Delmarva Heritage and Tradition. One gem that we have right here in the city of Salisbury is Poplar Hill Mansion. And today we're going to take a walking tour with our cameras, and to guide us on that tour is the curator of Poplar Hill Mansion, Nancy Marasco. Nancy, thank you for inviting us in.
Oh, well, welcome to this beautiful home, Phil.
Oh, it is gorgeous, and I'm just so pleased to be here, and all of us are too. Some of us, including me, have been here for special occasions. I've been here to a wedding. I've been here for a reception for a circuit court judge when she was made a circuit court judge, and then I was here for a couple of county receptions. But this is going to be a very relaxed tour of Poplar Hill Mansion with you, and we're so pleased to do this. So we're going to take our camera along, but first let's just talk about the history of this place where we sit.
I'd be happy to share that information, and I know, as you've already noticed, it looks very different today as it is staged as a house museum than when you're here for an event.
Yes.
So I'm very pleased to take you all through today. The foundation was laid in 1795. The bricks probably coming from Pemberton, originally 367 acres from Pemberton's Goodwill, which is an extension of the Handys. Not sure which Handy it was, Joseph or Isaac, but we do know it was about 367 acres at that time. Mostly corn, and they raised merino sheep, which was very unusual to the U.S. at that time.
What kind of sheep?
Merino.
Merino sheep.
Yes.
Huh.
Very different, because they're not as curly, and it was the first time they had been introduced into the southern part of the United States. They came mostly from Spain and Portugal. The gentleman who was credited with actually beginning the house was Major Levin Handy. He was quite an entrepreneur in the Salisbury area. And remember, Salisbury was founded in about 1732. So he'd been here for a while and kept purchasing property after property. We do know he started the house, but then he died of gout, which is, we're very grateful you don't die of gout any longer. But it left his wife and children having to sell the house because they could not pay for the property, the house, and the other properties he had purchased in the area. So we believe it was not complete when it was sold again, probably around 1802, maybe even 1803. And the deed at that time shows the property was sold for $300. So that is another kind of clue that the house wasn't completed, along with the fact the nails aren't the same on the first floor as they are on the second. Oh. So there are all those little nuances that make us not quite sure, but always open for a question, and sometimes history needs to be that way. The next gentleman that moved in was Dr. John Houston and his wife Sarah and their 4 daughters. Dr. Houston was the first surgeon in Salisbury, but Salisbury did not have a hospital yet at that time. And for those of you who have lived in Salisbury for a long time, there actually was a Houston Street, which is now where the hospital is. The street was taken away as the building was expanded. So that was certainly in his recognition. So he pretty much is credited for finishing the house with the original plans. And his family lived here until 1897.
Is it assumed that he practiced out of this house? Or did he have an office or something?
We don't believe he had an office, but when he died in 1828, the county came in, and by the way, that was Worcester County at that time, came in and did an inventory, and there was a large number of medical equipment pieces here in the house. So he probably saw patients in the house, but again, in that time frame, it might even been more likely for him to go house to house. Literally the doctor who made the house calls.
Yeah, yeah.
And then after he died, one thing we are very grateful for is we actually have a copy of his will from 1828. Well, actually, it's not his will. It is the list of the inventory in the house, which was done by the county, which is the beginning of the inheritance tax. And that is what the Friends of Poplar Hill Mansion are trying to do, is to replicate that list by knowing the items and then getting the house all set up with those items.
Yeah. So a lot of research goes into trying to when this room, for instance, the parlor, and you pointed out some areas where the paint is chipped off on purpose.
Yes, right.
try-
I want to make sure the viewers realize the mansion is not in disrepair. We actually paid someone to do that, and that is a paint analysis, so we could go back and document original paint colors, and that's what we've done.
I see. And we'll go through some rooms where the color is actually the authentic color that was used back in the early 1800s.
Absolutely, that's exactly what we're going to do today.
Now this very light, airy, beautiful room we're in now, the parlor. Tell us a little bit about the room itself and then some of the furnishings.
Sure, I'd be happy to. This is always a very bright room because the windows here face south and west. The windows themselves are really very remarkable because they are considered 12 over 12 sash windows. So they let in a lot of light, a lot of brightness, even on a gray day, a little bit kind of like today. There is in this room a print of George Washington. When the house was begun in 1795, George Washington was president. And when the house was completed, probably in about 1804 or 5, Thomas Jefferson was just beginning his second term. But he wasn't as well liked as George Washington, so it wasn't uncommon to continue to have George Washington's portrait hanging around in a room. Mm-hmm. This room would have been used probably for the gentlemen who were visiting, and after dinner, this is the room they would come in. Be offered a pipe, have a smoke on that, have a little brandy after dinner, and talk about politics and current events of the day.
Mm-hmm. And the ladies would go elsewhere.
Ladies would go elsewhere, but I want you to make sure that you understand that women talked every bit as much as the men did about politics, although never in mixed company.
I see. Well, that doesn't come as a surprise to me. Tell us about is this called dental molding or the molding around the ceiling?
Right, this is not dental molding. This is a really particular type of molding, very unusual in the house. The house is 11 feet 8 inches in each of the room for the ceiling heights. Each of the moldings in the rooms, as you'll see today, are all different. This is particularly ornate. And the area that looks as if it is 5 exclamation points is about to be painted a shocking teal blue, of which we have a sample. So this room is really very spectacular in its color. These, by the way, are made out of wood. That is unusual. Normally during the federal period, which is generally speaking about 1795 to about 1820, this type of crown molding was done in plaster. It was easy to replicate, and it could be done in no time at all. What probably was done here was an artisan was brought in from Philadelphia, Baltimore, maybe even Boston, and they probably stayed for at least a year, lived in the house, and worked on all the wood.
That is absolutely unbelievable that somebody would actually use tools to cut into wood. Each one of that, it must have taken, I would imagine, a year. It would take me a lifetime, but anyway, and I still couldn't do it. That's absolutely gorgeous.
It is. This one is especially ornate, and I like to remind our visitors too that, remember, there were no Sears Craftsman tools at this point. This is all hand hewn.
Yeah. Well, the craftsmen, I think, made their own tools.
Absolutely, absolutely.
There is a spectacular blue in Mount Vernon, George Washington's house, which is when you first walk into that room, and I think it's the dining room, if my memory serves me correctly, and it's you don't think of that bright color associated with the late 1700s or early 1800s, and yet there it is in Mount Vernon. Could be the same blue, a similar blue.
It's very similar to that, and you know, if you're remembering 25 years ago, and of course that dates everybody, Williamsburg had a color that they actually called Williamsburg blue, and it was a lovely slate gray blue, and oh so wrong when they did an actual color analysis. The bright colors were used because they faded very quickly. So the idea was when they were first put up, they were really quite bright, but faded because of the strong sun and very few curtains at this time as well.
Now this building and property is owned by the city of Salisbury, is that correct?
That is correct. The property and the building is owned by the city.
We've heard for years about the Friends of Poplar Hill Mansion. Tell us a little bit about the Friends of Poplar Hill Mansion.
Oh, I'd be happy to. I kind of liken it to a condominium where someone else owns the outside and you take care of the inside. And that's kind of this really good relationship that we have with the city of Salisbury. They own the building, they own the property. And it's the Friends of Poplar Hill Mansion who maintain and restore the interior of it. We work very well with keeping everything updated. For instance, the building is air conditioned. It's centrally air conditioned with zones to make it a little more energy efficient. And the air conditioning is not put in for my comfort, although quite frankly I enjoy it, as do our guests. But it certainly is a huge difference in the restoration and the way the walls look because they are plaster. And without that, you find some severe damage and crumbling because of the high humidity and the changes of temperatures throughout the year.
Now the exterior, I noticed a couple of newer additions as far as the outbuildings are concerned. One in particular out on the, I guess that would be the northeast corner of the property. What is that building?
That's actually the privy.
The privy.
Some people call it a necessary, and others call it an outhouse. It's a 5.5 seater. It didn't originally belong to the property. It belonged...
Now wait a minute, 5.5 seater?
5.5 seater, yes.
You're gonna have to tell us about that.
I will tell you about that. It is separated 2 seats and a wall, and then 3.5. And originally it was done 2 for the men and 3.5 for the ladies. The half seat is for toddlers because they needed to learn to be toilet trained, and that's how they did that.
I see.
That outhouse came from a home just 2 blocks away on William Street. They generously donated it to us. It wouldn't have been used by the original owners.
So it's not new construction?
It is not new construction. It dates about 1897.
Wow.
For us here in the house, that is new construction, but for everybody else, no, it's not. But it's an interesting story that it wasn't that a family that would use that facility together stayed together. It was a family of prominence and wealth. You would have had your own seat in that privy.
In addition to that, outside, we notice some, is it American boxwood or English boxwood?
We have both in the house. We have English in front and we have American in the back.
Would that have been the case back in the early 1800s? They would have both?
They would have had both. That would have been common. But because this was a working farm, and a lot of people kind of confuse that, thinking because of the name Poplar Hill Mansion, it was a working farm, and there would not have been a yard. It would have been corn up to the front door.
Oh. Use every inch.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Now, there's also some plantings out back, some magnolias and some Nellie Stevens and that sort of thing. Who decided what to put outside, what plantings to put, and how long have they been here?
We do have some beautiful magnolia in the back, and we have some very old Nellie Stevens on the property. We're down to just maybe 2 or 3 building lots at this point, size-wise. We're not sure if we have anything that's on the property that was original. Poplar trees, unfortunately, their roots grow more horizontal than they do vertical. They're very fast growing, but they don't live very long because of that. A good wind and off they go. We also have crepe myrtles on the property that are very old as well. So we don't know how much was planted and when it was. There's always a big push for the records of history 200 years ago, but people forget that what we do today is going to be history. So we don't have a lot of information on what is here, but we are working very hard on that.
But one treasure that you do have is the inventory that was taken on Dr. Houston's death.
Right. That is a huge treasure for us to have, actually. And that is what we're doing to replicate, but that won't tell about trees. That will just tell about possessions, which also, by the way, include the 17 slaves that were working at the house, because
17.
they were possessions at that time.
Yeah. Now let's come back to this room and how it's furnished. Would some of the items in here have been mentioned in the inventory? Not the very ones, but something
very
like that?
similar to things. The chair you're sitting in and the chair across the room are both actually, the style of the chair is Martha Washington. I'm sitting in a wingback chair. And recently, our Mansion Improvement Committee had these 3 chairs reupholstered to be in more appropriate patterns and material.
I particularly like that upholstery there. They're all beautiful, but that's...
I do have to tell you a story about that, and I'm not going to give away too many secrets today because I really want everybody to come in and get the whole 9 yards.
Oh, we do too.
But this is a great story, especially as we bring children into the room, because I have always thought you should take advantage of what's in your own backyard, and it's been my real push over the last 2 years that I have been here to bring more school-aged children in here. We get into this room, we know for a fact that Dr. Houston was in the house in 1805. So we talk about the great things that were happening all over the world in 1805. Lewis and Clark were just led by Sacagawea, and they found the Pacific Ocean. 1805, which brings this chair into play, was when Napoleon Bonaparte was just about king of the world. His pattern on his dress uniform was the bumblebee, of course, B for Bonaparte. If you were a higher level officer in his army, your bumblebees flew up. If you were a lower level officer, your bumblebees flew downward.
Oh, isn't that interesting?
So this is a great way for us to bring that into the time frame of the house. They like stories like that, and I am so proud of the docents that we have. They're wonderful about telling stories, and that's the way to get the history through to the children especially.
Tell us about this magnificent desk, or secretary's desk.
Isn't that a beautiful desk?
Yes.
It is. On the top half of it, we actually have books that belong to the Wallers, and the Wallers were the last full family who lived in this house, and they had 8 children, and all of those books belong to the children. And I'm very grateful to have those. But it would be several levels. This is a reproduction, but it's a very old reproduction, and quite frankly, a very good one. It is a total writing desk. You can push in the supports, push back the top of it, and it's just a very fine piece of furniture that we have. Lots of little pigeonholes and little desk drawers to hide great treasures in.
Beautiful. Now, you promised you were going to tell me and us about this mantle clock.
I am. Thank you for reminding me. It is one of, I think, our pride and joys. It is an Eli Terry mantle clock. What makes it amazing is that our mantles in this house, which is not uncommon, are only 5 inches deep. And so it's really very difficult to put anything on it. Eli Terry was an amazing Connecticut clockmaker. He grew up in the Naugatuck Valley, which, by the way, is where my family is from, so it's kind of a personal touch to it as well. And he is credited with carrying the most patents ever for a clock manufacturer. Originally, he would make, as other clockmakers, about 8 clocks per year, and that was it. And he was able, through water power, to make jigs and wheels to use for these mechanisms, interior mechanisms, to mass produce this. So he is not only a craftsman, but also a real pioneer in mass production. His favorite student who took over for him is Seth Thomas.
Wow.
And the idea of the movements on the clock being accurate for 30 hours, being much more condensed in size and accuracy than a tall, freestanding grandfather's clock. The mechanisms are all in the top 2/3 of the clock, and the bottom third is always a back-painted Connecticut scene.
Beautiful.
It is
now,
beautiful.
Is that the property of the Friends of Poplar Hill?
This one does belong to the the Friends of Poplar Hill Mansion. Yes, it does.
How do the Friends acquire some of these items? Do some people loan items to the Friends?
We do. We have several different kinds of loan agreements, if you will. We have some things that are on just a short-term loan if we're having a special exhibit, or if we need something for instance, in the dining room, the main dining room, we have something on the mantle there that's been on loan from one of our board members just because it needed something wonderful there, and sometimes the funds aren't always there to get what you want. We also have things that we have been graciously permanently loaned, which means it's ours until we go away, which we of course hope is never. And we have some of those from the Wycomico Historical Society as well as the Maryland Historical Society.
You mentioned the main dining room. There's a secondary or smaller family dining room, and there are 2 portraits in there. Tell us about those.
Levin Winder, who was the governor of Maryland in 1812. And the Winder family and the Handy family are kissing cousins. So that there is a family connection with that, along with the fact that he was governor and they were just newly into this house.
Mm-hmm.
The second portrait in that room is of Bertha Lewis, a lovely woman, Salisbury resident, who lived on Camden Avenue and ran an antique dealership out of there. And when she passed away about 10 years ago, she left an endowment to the Friends of Poplar Hill, along with some really fine furniture, because she loved this home.
Oh, so in tribute to that.
In tribute to her, we are happy to display her beautiful portrait, by the way.
It is a very attractive portrait. Now the dining room, the main dining room, the large table and the other furnishings in there.
A room that today we would call a great room. It does have a very large dining room table. The dining room table style is Chippendale. It's with a straight leg. We have just painted that in January following the evidence that was found by our art appraisers and analysis. And that color, which is, it's very unusual. It's sometimes very orange and sometimes very pink. It's actually called Cedar Pass. And originally that color would have been made by boiling onion skins. Oh. We, however, went to local paint store.
Now the chairs in there are beautiful needlepoint, aren't they?
They are
needlepoint?
Gorgeous. They are needlepoint. The pattern is Bargello, and they were done by the Embroidery Guild here in town quite some time ago. And as it turns out, they are the perfect complement to the new paint colors in that room.
Absolutely, absolutely. Well, now, each and every time that I have visited here, it's been for a special occasion, and going upstairs was a no-no. Are you going to invite us to go upstairs?
I am, and let me tell you why. I don't want to go to a house museum without at least seeing one bedroom. And upstairs there is an amazing architectural detail, and those are our Palladian windows, and you need to see those as well.
Yes, yes. So was this always a bedroom?
It was always a bedroom, and it was actually originally the nursery where all of the children would sleep. Dr. Houston had 4 daughters, for instance. The 3 older ones would have slept in the bed, and the youngest one would have been in a cradle like this, probably until they were about 3 or 4. And let me tell you why, Phil, I know this is the nursery. The first thing is what you have your hand on, is look how low in proportion the mantle is than it was in the mantles downstairs. The other item is this architectural detail, which is called a dog's ear. And they were only put in nurseries because they were thought to be very whimsical. So this is why we know that this is the nursery.
Only source of heat, the fireplace.
Correct.
The fireplace in all the bedrooms.
All of the bedrooms.
Main rooms downstairs.
Absolutely.
And, okay, 4 daughters were in here. Where did 4 daughters keep all of their clothing?
A very interesting question. What we have in the house, what you and I would call a closet, which would be this door here, and what in there are pegs and shelves. Everything would have been folded. Hangers weren't invented until 1847 by the Shakers, by the way.
Oh.
Would not be uncommon, though, that perhaps with that number of children that they might have added a wardrobe. This is a particularly beautiful piece. It came from the Humphreys house, and one of the Houston daughters married Humphrey Humphreys, and we are very pleased to be able to showcase it here in the nursery.
Yeah, yeah. Okay, and this quilt?
The quilt is a very beautiful piece. It has been tea-dyed to look as if it's very old, although it is not very old. It was also made by the Wacomico Women's League.
Oh.
And the idea of it is actually, by the way, the most photographed piece in the house. And it is the starburst pattern and is used to represent and celebrate the bicentennial. The bicentennial in Salisbury is 1932, and the idea was that it is 13 spikes for the 13 original colonies, and the 14th one represents the Declaration of Independence.
Oh.
And then if you come to visit, you'll learn about this bed, or beds like this, and the beginnings of that expression, sleep tight.
Oh, because of the...
And we'll show you where that
slats.
came from. They're not slats, no.
Rope.
It is rope.
Well, I'll be darned.
Yeah.
So this bed is authentic to the period.
Yes, it is. And this is on loan to us, for instance, from the Wicomico Historical Society.
Oh, great.
And you also may have noticed that there's a high chair in this room. And I get questioned about that a lot, and I will tell you that it is appropriately in this room. That up until you were probably 5, maybe even 6, you had your meals in this room. In modern days terms, you were not human enough to join the rest of the family because your manners were not developed enough to sit during dinner.
In Dr. Houston's inventory, there were 17 slaves mentioned.
Yes.
So the slaves would take care of cleaning, cooking, and probably tending to the children.
Right. And during that time frame, you were allowed to pay the county, in most places it was the county, extra to teach a slave how to read and write, because it was illegal during this time frame to teach slaves basic math and reading skills. So you would pay extra, and then the young woman who would be in charge of the children would be able to give them their education as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. We want to go out here into the center hall, just so we can see those windows.
Absolutely, you do. Let's
All
go
right.
there next.
Okay.
Poplar Hill Mansion is really pleased to be able to showcase our Palladian windows. They are on the south and the north side of the mansion. You are looking at the ones that face south at the moment. They were traditionally the one arched window in the center and matching side lights, they were called. Andrea Palladio was an architect in Italy in the mid-1500s, and actually he was excommunicated from the Catholic Church because he used these in homes, and it was felt that they were certainly more church-like than they would be more residential. So by taking the stained glass out and making them clear glass, they were then allowed to be in houses. And you'll see these in this period, and it wasn't until the Victorian time that the stained glass actually went back into them. But in a very prominent house, and always facing south and north. So originally, there was a door here where the spinning wheel was, and it goes to a door that is in the settling room. So the windows are open in here right now, but you can see how hot it is, and it's not a particularly hot day outside. So oppressively hot in the summer and very cold in the winter. What's very interesting up here is that originally the roof was a cedar shake shingle, and then in probably 1897, 98, somewhere in that way, the family who purchased the house decided to change it to the slate. And so you can see the difference between a hand-hewn beam and then one that is milled, because they had to add it to support the roof. But this is amazing up here.
Oh, so
Pretty much every other was used to add the support for the extra weight of the slate.
And this like the slats up here
would have been the floor for the male
sleeping
slaves,
quarters for the
men.
males.
Yep.
The male slaves.
Right. What is remarkable up here, but you can't really see it as well from inside the house as you can from outside of the house, are the bullseye windows on both the east and west sides. And they are very New England in their style, and the original plans probably came from Rhode Island and in that area.
Look at the widths of the boards in this attic.
See, now this is how the floorboards probably would have been originally downstairs. The wood that was used on an attic floor like this came as the house was being built. This wood was the scaffolding. So the scaffold was dismantled as they got up higher, and that's where the wood was.
Oh, neat.
This is original, by the way, is this ladder.
Oh.
The average white man during this time was 5'4", which is what my height is. If you were a black man, it depended on which tribe you came from. You could be 6 foot, you could be 5 foot. I'd like to give you an introduction on our wonderful collection of Clara Gunby paintings. We have 7. There are 2 additional ones at the NAB Center here in Salisbury as well. Clara Gunby came originally from Fruitland, just south of Salisbury, and was quite a woman of her times. She was tried, convicted, and sentenced to hang for treason. She was a spy for the South. And she did paint these all after her time up at Fort Monroe. She was pardoned because no one, North nor South, wanted to see a woman hang for crimes such as she was convicted of. The top portrait is of her younger sister Annie. This is her mother in mourning just after her father had died. This is my very favorite painting of the collection. This is obviously a very poor young woman selling flowers, and we know that for a lot of reasons. First of all, she's selling wildflowers, and also because the background of the painting is where the paint is chipping. This next painting she talks about in her diary, which is also available at the NAB Center. She talks about looking out of her prison room in Fort Monroe and seeing these beautiful ships and these white cliffs. And then we have to kind of bring it back to reality and say, well, Fort Monroe doesn't overlook White Cliffs, which are probably White Cliffs of Dover, and certainly during the Civil War there was not a regatta like this. The end painting, she talks about extra food while she is imprisoned and feeding it to the birds. Again, very unlikely. Extra food was probably not what happened while she was imprisoned, and probably didn't have a room with a view as well. We are very excited to have our officer back. He was just recently restored, and we don't know who he is, but we are very happy to have him back. Also a Clara Gunby portrait. We have one more portrait, and then we will be very proud to display her entire collection here at Poplar Hill Mansion.
Well, this is just so much fun, just being here. Now this room, again, the parlor, and you said you had an expert take paint samples. Any idea when you're gonna, is that one of the next projects to repaint?
This will be, but it's not just as simple as repainting the room. We have to worry in this house a little bit about lead abatement. Mostly the paint is in really good condition, so all we need to do is just encapsulate it, which means just painting over it. But all along on the 1st and 2nd floor, the wainscoting has a crack in it, which I have no problem with, but it does, and that's simply because the boards on those were placed horizontally. So we do dig through, pull it out, and then try to refill it so it doesn't happen again. It is already popped through on the other floor, so that there's plaster repair that needs to be done, and a small amount of just work before it can be painted. And I'm a little fussy about the paint because there were no rollers in 1805. I do not let our painters use rollers. I want to see the brush strokes. So that takes a long time as well to do that.
Even more authentic too.
Right.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And the mantle in here, as you'll see, it is also in the small dining room, was actually a faux marble finish. They were not marble. It was a paint finish, like we use paint finishes today, to look like marble. And that takes an artist rather than a flat painter who does the walls. So
well, the baseboard in the small dining room
right,
is
the baseboard as well as the mantle. Yes.
Yeah, very nicely done.
It's very beautiful, yeah.
Now the huge entrance door, the front door of this building, the inside has been stripped down to its original, looks like.
Yes.
To the wood.
Yes.
What were you able to find out about that?
That was really amazing. We were really pleased when that was done. We had to actually take it out of the house to refinish it, replace the bottom panel just due to years of water damage. It is the original door on the house. And we did find that the wood is probably pine, maybe poplar, but it was not uncommon during that time to actually do a faux painting on the door to make it look like a much richer and more expensive wood, this probably mahogany. So it actually will have a faux mahogany grain to it when it is done. The other thing that we found was very unusual is we believe that these gorgeous brass locks were original. We don't think so any longer because there is a definite mark on the inside of the house, on that door, that the lock was originally much bigger.
Oh,
But early in 1800, Salisbury had a brass refinery, and it may very well be that when that happened, they decided to go from a plain black or gray metal to the fancier brass pieces.
but on some of these interior doors, like the room we're in, this hardware, this brass hardware was here
Yes.
when you acquired the building.
Right, and we do believe this is original.
Yeah. Oh,
Right.
it's just beautiful.
With our wonderful doors, by the way, which have a story on their own, the house, the property here did not have a church or a chapel. Very unusual during that time. So instead what the family did was install what they call Christian doors. It kept, their feeling was, it kept the good things in and maybe the not so good things out. And if you look at the size, the style of it, you see that it represents the cross.
Mm-hmm.
It's a 6-panel door. The top 4 panels, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, and the bottom panels represent an open Bible, Old and New Testament.
Well, that particular type door is replicated in many, many houses.
It is.
In Wycomico County and probably all over the United
All over,
States.
and I think
Yeah.
people just don't know that it's other
But
than
it's
a
a great, yeah.
6-panel door. But there is
Yeah.
a story behind
There sure is.
the proportion of the 6-panel door.
Now, the portrait of George Washington that's in the entrance hall. Let's talk
Mm-hmm.
about the entrance hall. It's extremely wide. And there's a portrait of George Washington there as well.
Right.
Another tribute to our first president.
Absolutely, and not uncommon to have more than one of George Washington in. And as far as the entrance hall goes, they use the halls, both here on the first floor and as well on the second floor, as rooms. Generally speaking, the front hallway, as we would call it, would have been for entertaining. It was pretty much kept clear, and that's where they would dance because that would be their big entertainment.
And the stairway, which you're going to take us up in a little while, that's the original staircase.
It is.
Isn't that wonderful?
Oh, it is. This is just a beautiful, beautiful, very significant house museum right in everybody's backyard.
Yeah. Now, keeping in with the historic presence where we are you going to offer me a glass of sherry before we leave, or a pipe?
Well, if
So I
I
can smoke
were
a pipe?
if I were the man of the house, absolutely. However, I will not offer you the sherry or the brandy. It could be either in this room because this is my concoction of food coloring, water, and a drop of Clorox, so it doesn't grow anything.
Oh, so there's no alcohol in it?
No alcohol, so I'm so sorry to say, but let me do tell you about the pipe.
Yeah.
Because the pipe is very interesting. Obviously, if you were going to be here as a guest for quite some time, you would bring your own pipe as a gentleman. A gentleman in the house would have a beautiful hand-carved either ivory or wooden pipe. But to offer his guests, who might just be there for the evening, he would offer this clay pipe. They were inexpensive, they had a very small bowl and a very long stem. The reason for the long stem is that after you were here, Phil, I would snap off the very end of it and then be able to offer it to my next guest who might be coming in a week.
And that'd be a fresh
Then you'd have a fresh
pipe. Yeah.
Yeah.
Nancy, this has been fun, and we thank you so much for inviting us in to share this gem here in Wycomico County in the city of Salisbury with all of us. And if people are interested in contacting you as a representative of the Friends of Poplar Hill Mansion, how would they do that and find out about how they could rent this place for a reception or a wedding or whatever?
And that is a way we do fundraise here, is we do rent this out as a venue for a very special occasion that you might have.
And it would be special if it were
It
here.
would be. We have a website, www.poplarhillmansion.org, and my personal address on that would be curator@poplarhillmansion.org. We're always open on the first and third Sundays of the month from 1 to 4 p.m. for free tours, always.
Oh.
And you can give us a call at 410-749-1776. And if I'm around, I would be more than happy to take you on a tour. We do charge, if it's not a free Sunday, $3 a person. We'd be happy to do that. And I have the incredible privilege of living in this home.
Oh, my.
And so I'm here a lot and usually available to give you those tours.
Yeah. Great phone number, by the way.
Oh, it is a good phone number.
Yeah. Great phone number, and an outhouse with 5.5 holes in it. That's There's a lot of unique things here, aren't there?
There are, and wonderful stories to go with each of those
There's
items.
sure a lot of stories that you have yet to share with us. All we need to do is come here for a special occasion, and you'll do that.
Absolutely, be happy to.
Thank you so much, Nancy.
Thank you.
And thank you for being here with us at Poplar Hill Mansion on the corner of Elizabeth Street and Poplar Hill Avenue in Salisbury. What a gem this is for all of us. And thanks for being with us here on Pack 14.